Welcome to the Influential Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Duncan, and my dream is to inspire moms to pursue their goals and help them make a difference in their world. I'm a mom of 2 young boys, a wife to my high school sweetheart, and a lawyer. This show is a place to hear stories of moms working hard to have a positive influence in their profession or their community, and sometimes both, even as they juggle their responsibilities at work, at home, and to their children. You'll get tangible, practical tips for managing the chaotic world of motherhood and work. Come along as we hear these stories and feel inspired to step outside of our comfort zone as leaders and as a positive force within our communities. I believe that moms can change the world. Okay, Molly, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, this is wonderful. It's going to be a great conversation. I think you have a lot to share with the moms who are listening. So we have Molly Stillman, and she's a blogger and a podcaster. And your blog is Still Being Molly, and your podcast is Business with Purpose podcast.
Yep.
And Molly is a mom of 2 on earth and 2 in heaven. And I think we'll hear more about that as we chat. But other than that, Molly, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got here today?
Yeah, so I am a blogger and I am a podcaster, like you said. I've been blogging since 2007 and blogging full-time since 2014. And then I launched my podcast in 2016. So I've been doing that a little over 2 years. And I'm a wife to John, a mom to Lily and Amos here on earth, and Elijah and Malachi in heaven. And I just love my role as a mom and also as an entrepreneur. And I'm really passionate about showing women, all people, but I'm really passionate about showing women how they can pursue their purpose, no matter what, where they are in life, no matter what they do for a living. I really, truly believe that God places us in specific positions, in specific places, at specific times. And it's just how we use those things to fulfill that purpose and that calling. And I'm just really passionate about showing women how they can use their gifts for good.
I love that. I think that's such an important message. So you were blogging before you had kids. So
Yes.
It sounds like you're kind of a part-time blogger and then a full-time blogger. So how did you start? You started blogging, it sounds like when blogging was really kind of, getting off the ground. So tell us about the beginning of your blogging career and kind of how it started.
Yeah. So I started blogging actually in my live journal in college. If anybody remembers what live journal is, like that's going to be for the older folks. Yeah. It's real emo.
Yes.
It was like not,
I was there.
Yes. Lots of emotions, lots of dashboard confessional lyrics. But anyway, yeah. So I started that. But then when I graduated from college in 2007, I went to work for then Virginia Governor Tim Kaine. And so I was working in politics, which is a very not creative field. It was a really interesting job, a really unique job, but it was not very creative. And I was doing comedy on the side. So I'm actually a comedian by trade. So I did sketch and I did sketch and improvisational comedy for about 15 years. And so I loved to write. I was a creative writing major in college. And so I just loved to write. And so I started this blog because I wanted to be the next The Onion, if you know what The Onion is.
Yeah.
Is like that satirical news website. Yeah. So I wanted to be like The Onion. Clearly, that did not go very far. And so I would just kind of put some of my writing up there. And mostly it was like my family and my friends that read it. Occasionally something would get shared. But for the most part, it was just me kind of working out the kinks. But over time, so then I became actually a high school teacher after I left my job at the governor's office. I became a high school English teacher. And again, I just really needed that creative outlet. And so I still kept writing and just over time, as my life changed, I started to write more about what was just going on in my life. It really started first as a way to kind of keep up with my friends and family. After college, everybody kind of moves and goes their separate ways. And so it was a way for me to just, let people know what I was doing. But pretty quickly, I realized that other people that I didn't know were reading it and connecting with the things that I was sharing. I was, in my early 20s and then my mid 20s, and I was going through a lot. I was, we're talking at the peak of the recession. I moved to North Carolina. I couldn't find a job. Just life was happening and a lot was changing in my life. And so I just started sharing that stuff. And all of a sudden I started getting emails from people all over the country, even people in other countries saying, I really connect with this particular message that you shared. I really connected with this post, or, I've been really struggling in this area too. Or, this post you wrote really made me laugh and really made my day. And so I started to realize that this was a platform where I could connect with people through my writing. And so I started to just really focus on that. And I started focusing on growing it. In 2012, I rebranded and really became more of a life and style blog rather than just kind of like writing whatever came to my mind. I tried to focus it a little bit more. And I started taking it more seriously. I realized that I could monetize it. I realized I could be making money doing what I was already doing. I didn't change really anything about my content. I just became more strategic with it. And so I started monetizing it. It began to grow. And then by 2000, my daughter was born in 2013. And so I actually went part-time at my day job so that I could really work on continuing to grow the blog even more. And then by 2000, and I guess it was like early to mid 2014, I was able to leave my day job and I was able to take the blog full time.
That's wonderful. And I think that's a testament to, these things don't happen overnight. You definitely have to keep at it and keep working at it.
Yeah.
And
these are never
it did not
like
happen
an overnight,
an overnight, thing that happens. So how did you become passionate about ethical brands? Because I know that you're a lot of, what you write about and what you really try to, put out there into the world with your content is about ethical brands. So how did that kind of get woven into, your platform? And can you tell us a little bit about why ethical brands are so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of elaborate a little bit more. So my main focus of my blog really is, and my podcast is educating consumers and just sharing brands and companies that are producing their goods ethically, are and having a positive impact on the world. I'm really, really passionate about it. So I love talking about everything from fashion and jewelry and accessory brands that are producing ethically or they're fair trade, to, food and chocolate companies, to home decor, art, small businesses, things like that. And on my podcast, I've had everything from, I had an optometrist on my podcast who actually not only has a practice here in the United States, but he travels abroad to provide eye exams to kids in developing nations who don't have access to eye care, things like that. So, I've really kind of run the gamut of different types of businesses. But the reason I am so passionate about it is it actually started in 2011 on my first missions trip to Kenya. And I went on a mission trip to Kenya with my church, and we work with a couple communities there that we've developed long-term partnerships there. I've actually been back a few times. So I call them like my Kenyan family. Kenya is like my second home. And on our last day in the country, we had some time to kill before we went back to the airport in Nairobi. And so we actually did like a little bit of a touristy thing, and we went to tour the Kazuri bead factory. And Kazuri is spelled Kazuri, and it is a factory in downtown Nairobi. And they make clay beaded jewelry and pottery. I think they even sell like beaded sandals and, other types of accessories and stuff like that. They look very traditionally Kenyan, but they're beautiful. you walk in there and you're like, I will take one of everything, please. And everything is handcrafted right there on site. But as we were touring the factory, we were hearing the story of how Kazuri got started. But one of the things that makes Kazuri really unique is it's not only fair trade, but also what they are doing is they are employing women in the community who are vulnerable. And we're talking about single moms. We're talking about women with special needs. We're talking about women who, for one reason or another, have been outcast by their society, by their communities. Maybe they don't have an education. Maybe they are illiterate. These are women who traditionally have been placed on the outsides of their communities, and their communities want nothing to do with them. And so what Kazuri does is takes these women in and they provide them a living wage job. They provide them access to healthcare and education and childcare. And it's really a community. And so for the first time, I was able to see what the impact of just something as simple as providing somebody a job could do. Yeah. And it was really eye-opening for me. And it was the first time, I'd always thought of fair trade. I heard the word fair trade and I would think of like coffee, tea, chocolate, things like that. I never thought of the clothes that I was wearing, the clothes that I was buying, the jewelry I was wearing, the gifts I was purchasing, the home decor. I didn't think of any of that. And so that really opened up a door for me to begin to look into these things. And so I came home from that trip, changed in a lot of ways, but that was one of the things that really stuck out to me. And I began to just do more research, and I dove head first into it. And I began to research every company I could. And I really started the slow, painful, but beautiful process of really changing the way that I view goods, view consumerism, view purchasing things, view shopping, all those kinds of things. I really started to change my habits. I started to change what companies I wanted to support. It was not overnight. I am not perfect. I still love Target. I still walk in there and I'm like, yes, I will take one of everything. But no. It really did change a lot for me. And so that was sort of just the initial introduction into it. And then the more I learned, the more I realized what a negative impact the fast fashion industry has on humans and the world. I watched a documentary called The True Cost. It's on Netflix. I highly recommend you watch it. But I will give you the warning that you will probably want to change the way that you purchase things after watching that, because it really opened my eyes to the way that the fashion industry is connected to modern day slavery and human trafficking and all those kinds of things. It's pretty dark, but I really try to lead with an empowerment narrative that when you are purchasing from a brand that is producing their goods ethically, that is providing their workers a living wage, that you are empowering these people rather than leading from kind of like a shame mentality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what an important message to be putting out there, especially when you have a platform. So I think that's a tremendous opportunity, and what this podcast is all about, having a positive influence as a mom.
Yeah.
So how have you had your daughter, and your daughter and my son are almost exactly the same age. My son was born in July of 2013. So, so you said you went to blogging full time in 2014. So you had a very little one. And so how have you managed parenting? And now you have, your second child. And so you've got two little kids and you're, blogging full time, podcasting. How do you manage all of that? And it's kind of my secondary question is, do you believe in balance, or do you just say, some things are going to go?
Some things are just going to go. I really wish sometimes, especially in those early years, like when Lily was little, I really wish I had this like really pretty clean answer of like, oh, I had, I structured work time at this hour, from this hour to this hour. Like, no, that's not how it worked at all, because I was hustling my butt off, really trying to, because I wanted to do it full time. And I wanted to get to the point where I could replace the income I was making from my day job. And, and I wanted to get to a point where I could comfortably say, okay, I can leave and we're not going to take a hit financially.
Right.
So I worked a lot. And, in those early days, I will say, like, when she was little, like little, I would, because I was working part-time, I worked part-time from home. So, when she was a newborn, I mean, let's be honest, newborns nap a lot. So
Yes.
I would just work as much as I could on my day job and then get that stuff done and then work as much as I could on blog stuff. So during her nap times, or even if she was awake, like sometimes I would just kind of have her in the pack and play next to my desk, or I would have her in the bouncer next to my laptop, like I said, that those first 6 months before they're mobile, like there's not much that they can do. They just kind of hang out. Like, let's be honest, like it's like you can only read them, Goodnight Moon so many times. Like for the most part, they just kind of sit there and chill, or scream. Let's be honest, but give them snacks. So it's, obviously I hung out.
Then you move them from the bouncer to the swing, and
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, obviously I was always there, but it was nice in that kind of first 6 months because I could really just sort of work all the time. When she became mobile, obviously that was a little different. And obviously as she got older, but my husband was also building his business at the time. He was working for another company, but he had goals of eventually taking his business full time. So we both in those early stages, like we really hustled. And so we would, put our daughter to bed and then we would work. Like we would sit on the couch next to each other and work. And that wasn't always great. We definitely got to a point where we're like, okay, this is maybe too much. We should make sure that we're not doing this every single night of the week. And so I'm not saying that that's like the healthiest thing, but we eventually learned like, okay, so we're going to designate this night to be a work night. And then the next night is going to be an at-home date night. So we began to become really a lot more intentional with that and how we spent our time. And then as my daughter got older, then she started going to preschool a couple days a week. And so when she was going to preschool, I made sure to just hustle while she was at preschool. And then in the afternoons when she was napping, I would hustle. And so I really tried to make the most of that time when she was either at school or napping. And then when she cold turkey quit napping at 3, that was rough because she went from napping, like taking like epic 3 to 4 hour naps to just being like, nope, I'm not napping anymore. So that was really rough transition. But I started instituting quiet time. And so we actually still do that. She's almost 5.5 and we still do quiet time where she's in her room. She can literally do whatever she wants as long as it's not, destructive, but she can play or read or color or craft or whatever. She just has to be in her room and be quiet. And that actually has been really good for the both of us because then, like I said, I can work, but also it gives her kind of some of that independent downtime. And she's learned to really kind of be creative during that time where I'm like, nope, like this is not the time that mommy entertains you. This is the time that you go figure out if you're bored, go find something to do.
That's really good.
Yeah.
That's
so
important.
Yeah, it's so important. Like I always tell her, I'm like, my job is to love you, to feed you, to shelter you, and to clothe you. It is not to be your cruise director. Like that is not my job. So
that is exactly right. I love that.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not your cruise director. You bored. Like, what did we do when we were kids? When we were bored, did we go to our mom and be like, entertain me? No, our moms would be like, go find something to do. Like, go play.
Yes.
So, but
get outside, go.
Yes, exactly. Like go find some dirt. And yeah, so that's really, I mean, over the course of the last 5 years, that's really how I began the process. And then now that, she's in preschool 5 days a week, or she's in a transitional kindergarten program 5 days a week. And then my son goes 3 mornings a week. So I have more structured office time, where I work out of my husband's office during that time. And then I have, a short little bit of time in the afternoons when my son is napping and when my daughter's in quiet time. But it allows me to then, when they're not at school or they're not in quiet time or they're not napping, to be more present and more focused with them.
So, do you feel like you have currently kind of a favorite hack, in parenting?
Find yourself a friend who has an older daughter who's like about the age of 12 or 13 who can be a mommy's helper.
Oh, yes. I love that. I don't have that. I need to find one of those.
I'm actually really serious. So this works out really well. And I will say I'm super thankful and I do not take this for granted at all. But, starting about a year and a half ago. So this is even before she was homeschooled because my husband's assistant is actually one of my dear friends and she has a daughter who's about to turn 13. And she's now homeschooled in middle school. But even before that, she'd get out of school around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And instead of just like going to the office and hanging out at the office, she would come over here. And she's really like family, but it began, now my daughter and even my son and her have this just beautiful, almost sibling-like relationship where they can play and they love to hang out. And it's not only been beneficial for my kids, it's been beneficial for their friend as well because, she's almost 13. She got certified as a babysitter. And so she's gotten like all this experience in helping out around the house with me. And so it's now been great because now I'm at the point where I feel comfortable enough to be like, hey, I'm going to run to the grocery store and I don't need to like haul all of the children with me.
Yes.
And I can leave them alone. But it has been such a blessing. And I tell my friends now, I'm like, seriously, find yourself a friend with an older daughter who can be a mommy's helper because it has been just not only just helpful, but it really has been like enriching for our lives because I love too that if like there's something that I'm working on, like this is kind of a silly example, but it's one that is happening right now is our kids we finally just instituted that they're no longer allowed to say the word hate. And that sounds like really extreme, but it was like, they were saying that they hated everything. And I was like, you're going to get to the point where you can't differentiate between like, I hate broccoli and I hate this person. So we were just like, we're just going to blanket statement right now. Nobody can say the word hate. And so but it was really hard for them to hear it from mommy and daddy. We're like, no, you can't say hate. You can't say hate. So finally we told our friend's daughter, we were like, hey, FYI, we're throwing this in as a new thing that the kids can't say hate. Can you back us up? I mean, she's only 12, but she heard Lily say hate and she got on her right away. And like Lily looks up to her so much that she was like, oh, well, she says I can't say hate, so I'm not going to say hate anymore. And I was like, yes. So I have learned more than ever. It's, we always say like, it takes a village to raise a child, but lean on other amazing older kids in your neighbor. Like if you have older kids in your neighborhood, if your friends have older kids, like if you have older cousins, like obviously you want to make sure that they are a good influence, but I mean, really trusting that as a community, not only having amazing adults in your kids' lives, but also amazing older kids that they can look up to and have a strong example of. Like that is so important. And that has just been, I mean, it really has been like life-changing. And so I don't know if that really answers your question as far as a hack, but It really has been like so helpful.
Absolutely. Because I have not even really kind of thought about that as far as, you think about babysitters, but as like a mommy's helper who can just kind of be around and also be a positive influence when you're also around. It sounds like is kind of a game changer. And I need to find, I'm just sitting here kind of racking my brain, like where can I go find
who has an older kid?
Who has an older kid? So you kind of thinking about community and, and having those positive influences on your family. Y'all have had a hard year because you've had 2 miscarriages. And so I want to talk about that if that's okay. And kind of tell us a little bit about how those experiences this year changed you and your perspective on, parenting and marriage and your approach to your work, because I'm sure that had a life-changing impact on you this year, having gone through that twice.
Yeah. So, to make a very long story short, we lost our son Elijah at about 16 and a half weeks in February. It was a completely healthy pregnancy. Everything was normal. I went in for just a routine checkup, and we found out that we lost our son. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever experienced, for a lot of reasons. There's so much, you hear so often about, I think it's getting better as far as like how we hear about miscarriages, but there was just so much I was not prepared for. We found out that I lost him on January 30th, and I did not go in to the hospital to have him until a week later. So walking around for a week, still looking very pregnant, knowing that my baby had died was excruciating. It was awful. Because people would see me and say, "Oh, when are you due?" Things like that.
Oh,
It
man.
was
Yeah.
it was horrendous. We chose to have our son cremated. And so like going to a funeral home and having our son cremated and then bringing home this tiny little box of ashes, like just nobody prepares you for that stuff. And so I was really deep in my grief, and I began to see a counselor, and lo and behold, about actually 2 months to the day that Elijah came earthside, I found out I was pregnant again. And that was not planned. And I was like already about 6 weeks along. So I got pregnant
Oh, wow.
right away. Yeah. It was one of those situations where I was like, I know how this happens, but like, how did this happen? Like, how did this happen? Because I'm pretty sure, like, how did this happen?
Yeah. What was your reaction? Did you feel happy?
Oh, I had a panic attack. I had a
yeah.
full-blown panic attack. I was nowhere near ready to be pregnant, not even close. Because I had just gotten to the point where I was like, okay, we'll get through my due date, and then we can maybe talk about having another or trying again. And boom, there we were, and I was pregnant again, right away. So that was, I had a full-blown panic attack. Like, thankfully my husband was home when I took the test. But like literally the next person I called was my therapist. And I was like, do you have a session right now? Cause I was a mess. I was a full-blown mess. And a lot of it was I just had so much anxiety because I was like, I can't go through this again. Like, I cannot go through this again. And so that whole first trimester of my second pregnancy, I was giving that pregnancy the Heisman. Like, I did not want to get attached. We did not really tell anybody with the exception of our immediate families. Like, I was keeping it super, super close, but I was showing so quickly because my body never even recovered from my pregnancy with Elijah. Because it was my third pregnancy, obviously. Although I had a miscarriage really early on before Amos. But it was like before I'd even had a test. So this is like my third, like more like, it was my longer pregnancy. And so I had shown pretty quickly. And so my stomach really never went back down. So like all of a sudden here I am like 10 weeks pregnant with Malachi, and I'm showing like crazy, but I was just trying to hide it no matter what I could. And I was going for checkups more frequently, and my midwives were monitoring me very closely. And they were like, Molly, everything looks great. This baby's healthy, heartbeat's strong, growing, all that kind of stuff. And so we got to the end of my first trimester. I had another checkup, and my midwife was like, Molly, like, everything, you can breathe. Everything is great. This baby's healthy. We're looking great, all that kind of stuff. And so I left that appointment just feeling a whole lot better. We went to the beach as a family for our annual beach vacation. I was showing a lot. We took a couple like maternity pictures on the beach, all that kind of stuff. I was feeling great. And so we got home on Father's Day, and I was, my kids I had one of those at home Doppler machines, and my kids asked to hear the baby's heartbeat. And so I pulled it out and I couldn't find the heartbeat, and I had been able to find it, plenty of times before then. And so I tried about 8 or 9 times the rest of that evening. And I knew, but I didn't want to admit it. And so I called my midwife that night and I said, hey, I can't find the heartbeat. And so she said, I'm sure everything's fine. Let's come in tomorrow morning. So I went into the office the next morning, and it was literally deja vu all over again. And so we lost that son, Malachi, and he was about 15 and a half weeks. So he was just about a week earlier than Elijah. And so same thing all over again. I had to walk around looking pregnant with a baby that had died. I had to go to the hospital and have another baby and walk home empty-handed. I had to cremate another baby. I had to go back to the same funeral home. I had to order a second urn, like all within a span of 5 months. It was awful.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And so during that time, I obviously became extremely thankful for my children. I look at Lily and Amos now and just think, what if they are the miracles? They are the miracles. But I also have learned things to say and things not to say to women who have lost babies at no matter what stage, whether it's the first, second, third trimester, or an infant loss. Because so many times I think people, they want to be helpful and they want to sound encouraging, but they would say things like, oh, well, like at least you have Lily and Amos. And I'm just like, that doesn't negate the fact that I have 2 babies who died like that. You know what I mean? In some cases, I'm like, So there's a lot of things. I think that could be a whole nother conversation for another day. But so I learned to really appreciate them. I learned to appreciate my husband. We have really had to learn how to communicate better. We've always had good communication, but men and women just grieve differently. The second loss was way harder on him than the first one. The first one, it's not that it wasn't hard on him, but that, I think the week between when we found out and when I went to the hospital was really hard. But kind of once we had the baby, once we brought the ashes home, all that kind of stuff, it was kind of like closure for him. Where it wasn't for me. And so we had to navigate that. But after we lost Malachi, like it definitely hit my husband a lot harder than it did the first time. And I could tell. And so we've had to learn how to communicate how we are grieving differently. And it has, to be honest, it has strengthened my faith more than anything I've ever experienced in my life, because as a believer, like I realized that in this grief journey, I had 2 choices. I could, one, run away from God, and I could be angry at God, and I could curse God, and I could try and like deal with all of this on my own, which in my past, when I have tried to grieve on my own through other things in my life, that has not gone well. And it's only ended me in very dark, very sad places. And so this time, I kind of chose the other option, which was to just lean into God as much as I could. And I've done that every step of the way, and just opening my Bible more and listening to worship music more, and just really just laying every worry, every care, everything at the cross, and just saying like, God, I can't do this, but I know you can. And so I'm going to need your help. And that it sounds maybe cheesy or cliche, but it is the truest thing I know, because I have experienced it, and I would not be standing if it were not for that, truly. Yeah. There are days where I just, people say like, how are you okay? And I'm like, of course I'm still sad. Of course I still grieve. Of course, like the holiday season is really challenging. But it's just like Philippians 4:6. It's like that peace that just surpasses all understanding. And just that has filled me to the brim, and I just want to like tell everyone about it because it's just like I've experienced it and I know it to be real and true. And it's the only way I've gotten through this. Obviously, yes, community has been key, and friends in our church family has been key, and my immediate family, my husband and my kids have been key. But I can honestly say without a shadow of a doubt, like I would not be where I am if it were not for Jesus, for sure. So I know that's a long answer. But yeah, that's where I am.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I am sure that there are moms out there listening who have been through miscarriages and are, still, as you are, still in the grieving process and searching for that foothold, as far as searching for that peace and wondering where to turn. And so I hope that your message gives them hope, that there is, that is there in Jesus, and that they can find that peace. And your relationship with the Lord that has been strengthened through all this, I think I'm almost envisioning it as a foundation for your whole family, that through all of this pain, you becoming closer to the Lord through this is building an even stronger foundation for your whole family, which I think
absolutely
is so important. So
absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that. I think that miscarriage is not talked about enough. And
I agree.
I think that it's a relief for a lot of women to hear similar stories and to hear of women who have gone through it, and that the pain, acknowledging that the pain that they're feeling is real and okay and normal, and not kind of feeling like they have to shove it into this little corner and pretend like it didn't happen.
Yeah, I think that the more that we begin to share these stories, and I have found, it was one of those things where in a lot of cases I wasn't actually given a choice on whether or not to share it, because with Elijah, we had already announced that we were pregnant. We had put together this cute little announcement video. And so, I had shared this announcement video, and then here I am a couple weeks later, and now I have to share that we lost this baby. And so, now with Malachi, I could have just hidden it. We hadn't announced publicly, even though I was in my second trimester, but I realized, I said, you know what? There are so many women that have been walking this journey alone and have been silent. Maybe if I share, then somebody else will be brave enough to say, hey, me too. And I have found that to be true. So many women, women who lost babies decades ago have come out and said, I lost a son 20 years ago. I lost a son 30 years ago. I lost a son 15 years ago. Or I lost a daughter 12 years ago. And, and I don't ever talk about it. And I wish I could. And, the pain is still there. And so just for women to know that they're not alone, and that they're not alone in their grief journey, is so important. It's so important.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, if you were to give one short piece of advice, because we're about out of time, but one short piece of advice for a mom who is wanting to, she feels like she has a message and she's wanting to start a blog or a podcast, what's your one tip for? I know it's bigger than just one tip, but what would you say? Like, here's your starting point for that mom who wants to do that.
So I would say my advice is just do it. And I realize that might be overly simplistic. But the reason I say that is because I actually teach blogging classes. And so I've been teaching blogging classes for a few years now, and I've taught hundreds of students. And so many of those students are moms, and they have ideas for blogs, or they have ideas for this business, or they have ideas for this or that. And they feel like, they can't do it for one reason or another, because it's going to take away from family time, or it's going to be a sacrifice on their family, or, they don't have the time, or something. And I've had women like come back and take my classes multiple times, and they're like, I'm going to do it. And then they never end up doing it. And so sometimes I just want to look them in the eye and say, just do it. Just like go home, buy the domain name, and do it. Prioritize it. Like, if you have time to binge watch Netflix, you have time to take 20 minutes and buy yourself a domain name. Like, it's all, and I realize, again, it sounds overly simplistic, but so often we let excuses get in the way of us actually just doing it. And I am preaching to myself here sometimes. Like, there are things on my to-do list that I have been putting off and putting off and putting off. And I'm like, nope, now is the time that I need to just do it. I need to just sit down and do it and quit coming up with all of the excuses as to why I haven't. And don't buy into the lie that there's not room for your voice, that it's overly saturated or that there are too many. Don't buy into that lie. It doesn't matter if there are 17 million blogs out there. There's only one you. And so you can provide a unique perspective and a unique angle on whatever it is you want to talk about. So don't buy into the lie that that it's oversaturated and you can't do it. So just do it.
I love that. Yep. Just do it and get
there's room for you.
Yes. I love that. So as we wrap up, what's next for you? What's on your heart and what's your dream right now?
Yeah. So the preaching of that to myself is writing my book. So I actually started my book in 2017 and had to push pause on it when we lost Elijah. I lost the momentum there for obvious reasons. But I really felt God also saying, maybe that's not the story I was supposed to be writing. So, or that's not the book I was supposed to be writing. So I pushed pause on that and I haven't picked it back up in a year. So I believe 2019 is the year that I'm supposed to pick it back up and just do it. So I'm also preaching to myself in that is I need to just do it.
Well, we are here to cheer you on. That's
Thank
wonderful.
you.
That sounds very exciting. And where can everybody find you? I want to be sure that everybody can find you and maybe sign up for some blog classes and and start to take action.
Yeah, so I blog at Still Being Molly, so you can just go to stillbeingmolly.com. My podcast is Business with Purpose, and you can find it on any podcast app. And if you are in the Raleigh-Durham area, I teach in-person classes through SkillPop, so you can just go to skillpop.com and click on their Raleigh classes, and you can find the latest blogging classes I'm teaching. But I'm also hopefully working on creating some online blogging resources as well in 2019. So, and now that I've said it out loud on a podcast, now I have to do it.
You have to do
it. So those resources should also hopefully be coming in 2019. So
how exciting. Well, you've certainly had quite the year, and thank you for sharing so much about your platform and the year that you and your family have had. And, I'm so sorry about Elijah and Malachi. And I know that you're still grieving, and that we're recording this right before the holidays, so I know that you're about to enter a really hard time. So we'll be praying for you, and I'll certainly be thinking of you during this time, and as your family continues to grow and transition as the Lord sees fit. So
yeah, thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Molly. Thanks for tuning in for another inspiring episode of the Influential Motherhood podcast. Be sure to follow my own journey in motherhood and work at Melissa Duncan JD on Instagram, and follow the behind the scenes of the podcast at Influential Motherhood on Instagram and Facebook. If you're enjoying the Influential Motherhood podcast, please take a second to leave a rating or review in iTunes. It is how you can help other moms find the show so they can be inspired by these stories. See you next week.